Okay, hello everybody. Celia Waterhouse here. Welcome to OnPoint Mentors. Thank you so much for spending the time. We've got about an hour-ish to chat with our OnPoint mentor, Phil Lowe, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. Phil Lowe today has been a coach and a facilitator for 28 years. He's worked in psychology and the arts. He's trained as an actor and has worked as a writer most of his adult life, most recently as a screenwriter. He's a member of the English justice system, working with judges to decide the outcome of employment cases. Phil Lowe is an OnPoint mentor who specializes in leadership, executive coaching, and presentation skills. So if you're looking for anyone in those areas, check out Phil Lowe. Just as a background, if you don't know, OnPoint Mentors is a platform where if you're looking for a coach or a mentor, you can go on there and find a mentor anywhere located in the world. Phil Lowe is located in the UK, in London, I believe. And if you are a coach or wanting to become a coach, we can get you up and running and get your consulting practice started as soon as possible. So check us out. Welcome, Phil.
Well, thank you, Celia.
So you are not in London today, but at a country cottage or a country.
Yeah, we're spending a few weeks in the countryside. I have to say it's pouring with rain.
Oh,
so it's not the idyllic kind of English countryside that people might imagine. No, it's got grim weather and not that warm either. But yeah, so I'm away from my desk. I'm here on. It's got the worst broadband known to mankind as well in this cottage where I'm staying. So I hope that I'll stay with you through the whole of our interview. But it's looking good so far.
Great, thanks. Now I've been excited about this topic that you chose. Authentic leadership for a post-COVID world. I was like, does Phil know something we don't? Is it going to end soon? And not the world, the COVID, the COVID virus. So tell me, why did you choose that title and how did you come about?
Yeah, okay. Well, authentic leadership, and I'll say a bit more in a little while about what authentic leadership actually is, but that's been a particular speciality of mine right the way through my career. And I work with leaders at all levels in organizations, helping them bring who they are to what they do, if you like, so to be more, bring the best of themselves into their work. And I mean, like everyone else, I've been kind of locked down during the whole coronavirus pandemic and have been kind of thinking about what's going on and thinking in particular about what's going to be different when it's all over. Because I don't know how it is where you are, Celia, in the US, but certainly in the UK, everybody keeps talking about when things get back to normal. Right. And you think, I'm not sure actually that things are going to get back to normal. I think we're going to see some different things going on. So I was thinking, what kind of leadership do we need? And I started with the idea of authenticity because, well, for reasons, again, which I'll explain. But I have a couple of other thoughts as well about the qualities, the particular qualities of leaders that we need as people return to work after the pandemic and as it goes away. And I'm deliberately not talking about political leaders here. There's a lot we could discuss about political leaders because they're all very visible at the moment in this time of crisis. But I'm specifically interested in organizational leadership and what people do in the world of work. So that's what I'll be talking about today.
Fantastic, fantastic. So take me through your process.
Okay, well, before I mention leadership, if we could just move leadership aside for a moment as a topic and just mark it. I wanted to start with another topic because I think this applies to everybody, whether you think you're a leader or not. There is something big going on at the moment that we are all experiencing, and I think we need to talk about it because if somebody came to me for coaching, this would be one of the big things going on for them. And this is the idea of transition, personal transition. But by transition, if you think about change generally is something that is done to you. Somebody organizes a change and you're asked to do something differently as a result. Your reaction to the change, how you deal with the change happening is transition, is you in transition. And if you think about coronavirus, clearly it has put just about everybody on this planet into a time of transition. We are leaving behind the world that we knew, and we're coming into a different world. And in the middle is a whole load of mess, basically, that we're experiencing. So if I may, I want to take a few minutes to talk about a really simple model of transition, which I hope those who are watching and listening today, if you don't know this model, you may find this helpful. And this is a model that I fall back on when I'm coaching people who are in a time of transition themselves. This is from a gentleman called William Bridges, who's written several books about transition, but it's beautifully simple. That's why I like his model. It's simple, and yet it's kind of profound because there's a lot going on inside it. And his model, now I'm going to try and get this the right way around on the camera. That's right. We're moving from left to right. So, yeah. His model starts with endings. So in other words, every transition begins with an ending. I'll come back to that in a moment.
Okay.
Then we've got a middle section, a kind of middle transition section, and then we end with a beginning. So a transition is a kind of mirror image of what goes on to you when things change. Because if you're at work and somebody launches a change project, that change project has a beginning and then a kind of middle bit, and then at some point it finishes. But your reaction to the change is that, first of all, what you experience is an ending. Something's finishing. Something's not there that used to be there. Something's gone that you were used to, and that happens all through life. If you have a baby, it's the end of your life as not a parent. It is in effect an ending, although it's a kind of a beginning. If you're at work, as I say, and somebody comes in and says, "Oh, we're changing some stuff to do with your job. We're going to reorganize your department." Well, that's the end of the world as you knew it up to that point. And I'm pretty sure that by now, even if you hadn't heard this idea before, anyone who's watching and listening will recognize that this is exactly what happened when the coronavirus came to town. And I can tell you that the ending was happening when the first cases started to come out, but most people probably wouldn't have experienced it like that. Right. They would have kind of experienced it as, "Oh, this is something happening somewhere else that's nothing to do with me." We call that denial, of course, and I'll come back to that. Then I guess for most people, the time it became real was when your government or whoever it was said, "From now on, you've got to stay at home. You can't go to work. Don't go out. Or if you do go out, it's only to buy food," and so on. Right. And that's certainly what we had in the UK. At that moment, bang, the life you knew has come to an abrupt end, because the life you knew was typically about you going out when the hell you wanted and doing whatever you wanted and going to work when you had to and coming home. And all of that went. Now, let me come back to denial, because the first thing that happens is subconsciously, your unconscious mind wills you to make everything how it used to be, to stop things changing. It does this because we find change tiring. We find it exhausting, and our body is trying to help us conserve our energy. So if we can pretend that everything's actually the same as it was, then we don't have to waste any energy on transition. So these people might have said, you might have known people who said, because of course nobody here would ever have dared think of saying, "Oh, I'm going to be in denial." But you might have heard people saying, oh, it could just be a few days. It'll just be a few days and then it'll all be over. It's not a big thing, really. Or, "Oh, my boss is really on the case. She'll get us all back to work really soon, because obviously we're going to have to carry on working. So there's something, they'll come up with some idea." People say things like that. And what they're really saying is, please, please don't make me change. Don't make me have to go through this transition, because it's messy and I don't like mess. Yeah. So sooner or later, you would have found out that you couldn't have stayed in denial, and you move on and you get emotional. You start to feel, the mess of the whole thing, because the important thing here is we know that things aren't like they used to be, but we don't really know how things are or how they're going to be, because everything's up in the air. And the only way to survive the middle bit of a transition is to find a way to be okay with things being up in the air. You know, some people, and I don't want to, I want to be careful and not recommend this as something you ought to do, because it's not that easy. But there were cases of people who suddenly found a whole new way of work, a whole new piece of work for themselves. They found a talent for doing something during lockdown, and they maybe managed to turn it into a business. That's one way of accepting that things are not how they used to be. As the therapists say, it's leaning into the kind of mess. Now, I also know that people can get pretty smug about, well, hey, why don't you just start a new business, or why don't you try something different? And I think for a lot of us, that's not so easy. You know, if you've done a particular job for a long time, and that's what you know, and that's pretty well all you know, and now all of a sudden you're dumped at home, or even if you're working from home, that's not the way. That's not the kind of thing you're used to. I mean, let me say the other thing about working from home, which everybody's talking about as if it's a marvelous thing that should be, written on prescription by doctors for everybody for their mental health. A lot of people really hate working from home. They go into work to see their friends. They love the bit of work where they come in and say, hi, how are you doing? How was your weekend? Oh, did you see this film last night on TV? And so on. Now, what do they do when they're working at home? They kind of stand in front of the bathroom mirror saying, oh, hi. Hi, yeah, it's me. I know. It was yesterday as well, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. I think I'll do some work now. Okay, great. So it's not so easy. But the important point about being in transition is to accept that it's happening. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you if you find it difficult or if you find it messy. Really doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means you are human and you are reacting as humans do. It's happened to me. A lot of my work fell off a cliff when the lockdown happened. Any client that I was working with face to face, team facilitation, all of those kind of disappeared. I could do coaching work remotely through video, but I lost a lot of other stuff. So I had to go, okay, let's pretend it's never going to come back, and let me find other stuff. I got talking to people. I met Celia. I found out about OnPoint mentors. I thought, okay, that's a good thing. That's a good enterprise that I can be part of. So you have to be a little bit proactive, but I think it's mainly about just saying, okay, there will be an end to this. There will be a point where I find out what the new world looks like that I'm going to have to get used to. And until then, I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to be as calm as I can and just allow myself to kind of experience it. I mean, I've been talking for a long time. Does that make sense, Celia?
No, I have a couple of questions. So would you recommend that, so after you've accepted the situation, would you recommend someone to start perceiving it differently? Like maybe thinking, okay, so what could be some of the good things that come out of it? What are some of the benefits that we've learned from, staying at home, or that we've gained from staying at home, and things like that?
I think so. If you allow yourself to pay attention to what's kind of going on around you during transition, you may notice some things that surprise you. I'll give you a personal example. So my wife and I I've been living in London for 38 years, and my wife and I were considering moving out of London, out into the countryside. And we hadn't quite bottomed this out, because we were thinking, as a lot of people were saying to us, yeah, but are you sure? Are you really sure that this is going to work for you? There was a point during lockdown, after 3 or 4 weeks of just the two of us being in our flat without much to do, not going out and doing things, not seeing loads of people. I said, hey, you know what? This is a bit like moving to the countryside. We've kind of done it. We're here, just making our own entertainment, as if we were in a small cottage in the middle of nowhere. And that was a really I kind of joke about it, but it was a kind of really important realization, because it was a kind of, we'd done our testing
Right.
without having to actually move, because it was more about us and how we behaved and what we needed from our lives and so on. So you do find, if you can find areas like that where you think, there's a good thing happening here, and allow yourself to do that, because you may find that there are some things you want to do differently when things go back to normal.
Right.
No, they won't yet. And I'm sorry, did you have another question, Celia?
Oh, so COVID has become kind of an external, forcing us to do some, well, it's an external situation that caused us to change. What about the internal forces that cause us to change? Maybe a change in your value system that forces you to have to look at things differently.
Yeah, sure. Yes, there will be all kinds of things can trigger a transition, and some of them. And I know this isn't what you're asking about, but just quickly.
No, this is good.
Some of the things that can happen to you in the course of your work and life. I mentioned having a baby, but funnily enough, a lot of the transition coaching I've done with clients in the last couple of years has been because they were promoted, which you think, what, promoted? Isn't that a good thing? But actually, it causes you to question a whole load of stuff about yourself. Can I do it? Should I behave completely differently? How am I expected to be here? Do I deserve it? Why am I doing it? Do I really want it? Do I want all this hassle that comes with it? So you get all these kind of events that are like part and parcel of the way that we work and live, that can trigger these kind of experiences. But age can trigger it. There are. I'm going to forget the name of the guy who, I think it was Daniel Levinson, I think his name was. Forgive me if it wasn't, but he did a piece of research that looked at the regular way that people, as they get older, go through, have transitions kind of triggered. And typically, it's going to happen towards the end of a decade. So in your late 20s, you might find yourself starting to question the way that you're living and the way that you're working. And, am I just too loose? Should I be settling down? Those kind of questions. In your late 30s, when you kind of settle down, there's a bit of, is this what I really want? Have I got things right here? Can I make some changes? Is everything too rigid? Have I got too predictable? You get that going on. And in your late 40s, and I mean, for different people, kind of the big midlife transition happens at different times. So it could be late 40s, it could be late 50s, and all kinds of things. All kinds of things go up in the air. I mean, for me, I promise I'm not going to keep talking about moving to the countryside, but because it's a bit live at the moment and our house is on the market, and but that represented a huge shift for me and my wife, because it's a big kind of lifestyle change, and it represents, to come back to your question, Celia, a kind of change of values. What are the things that are kind of important to me? What is it that I need in order to feel kind of good about my life and in order to feel fulfilled? So no, absolutely. And I'm obliged to mention the benefits of having a coach in a time of transition. I talked about paying attention, and I think the difficulty when you're in the middle of a bit of turmoil and transition is it's actually quite hard to pay attention or to know what to pay attention to. So, if this kind of strikes a chord with anybody who's watching or listening here, if you hadn't considered working with a coach, it might be worth a session, where you can just splurge it all out and say, here's what's going on for me. And the coach can say, okay, sounds like this might be happening, or this might be happening, or have you thought more about this aspect? So I think the paying attention piece, like I say, don't beat yourself up if you don't think you're very good at paying attention to what's going on in transition. Sometimes you need a bit of outside help.
So how do you recommend, or what's your advice for people trying to get over the fear? That they're just frozen in fear, trying to make a decision, or again, COVID's come upon them and they've got to, accept it. But how do they deal with the fear?
Yeah, fear is kind of an annoying kind of thing, really, because it's very real and very large. I'm at risk of making the answer sound too simple, but I do quite like simplicity. Yeah. if you can make the thing you fear, find a way of making it less important or less significant, that can help. And I mean, a little bit playful. Well, I'll go back to my example of, during the transition, I've been using the time to reinvent some of my business, look for some new routes to market. I've done a couple of completely new websites. And what I found was I was being struck a bit by that kind of, yeah, but what if I've got it wrong? How can I launch this and I've got it wrong? What if this is completely the wrong direction for me to go in? And that was the kind of fear that I experienced. And the solution for me was to just, I know I'm stealing the title of a book if I say feel the fear and do it anyway. But what I decided to do was, I can change it.
Right.
I said to myself, don't forget, you can always change it if it's not working. And I've actually changed my title on my LinkedIn page about 3 times in the last month, and each time I realized in the end, I learned finally how to turn off the bit that notifies all the people who are my contacts that I've changed my title, because I kept getting emails from them all saying, congratulations on your new job. I haven't got a new job. You're saying I was this kind of coach, and now I'm saying I'm this kind of coach. That's all. So I think that if you can keep things low key and keep things, remind yourself that you're still in control. Generally speaking, we feel fear because we think we're going to lose control of something, but you're always in control. It just doesn't look like it when you look quickly. It's still you.
So what about the guilt that people feel that I should be doing this? You've mentioned the word should, and that is a word that a lot of people use.
Yeah. I worked with a coach once who had a great habit of saying to people, stop shoulding on yourself. And I think it's a really good piece of advice. And I guess you've spotted it, Celia, because I would imagine, like me, if you're coaching, you really hear that word when people start saying, yeah, I really should do this, or I really should do that. Get rid of those things, ask yourself, again, pay attention. If you hear yourself saying, I really should do X, just ask why. Why, where is this coming from? Right. Well, I won't say too much. It was quite a kind of personal thing, even though you don't know who I'm talking about. But I had a coaching client, again, being promoted. Everything she said about being promoted made it sound like there was a lot of shoulds in it and a lot of fear in it. So both the things you've just been talking about. And I thought, I don't understand why this person is so keen to get promoted. And of course, as a coach, you then think, I better ask. So I said, what is it that you think that being promoted will give you? And it was basically something to do right from her childhood that was just to do with the family and, feeling good in the family. And it's again, like fear, it's a powerful thing that we do feel guilty. We feel like we should do something because that's what we used to do in order to kind of make our parents feel that we were okay. But I think you just need to recognize it for what it is, and find a way to put it aside. And if you came to me, I could ask you a few focus questions that would help you to do that, obviously. And if you're not working with a coach, you have to find a way to ask yourself a few focused questions about that question I mentioned. When you're shoulding about something, ask yourself, what is it that I think I'm going to get in return for doing this thing I think I should? Why does it seem so important to me? What's the payback? And see where that answer takes you. You might find something surprising, and it might help you to feel less guilty and less shitty about it. I'm aware I must start talking about leadership, mustn't I? Sorry, I've been on about.
You can talk about whatever you like.
We promised there's all these people here tuning in to authentic leadership for a post-COVID world. So I wanted to say all of that, right, all the stuff about transition as a kind of backdrop, because that's the universal human condition going on at the moment. So if you are in a leadership position, if you have people reporting to you, if you're kind of responsible for a part of an organization, even if you're an individual contributor in a job where you have to influence people and kind of bring them with you. So leadership in any sense. First of all, you've got to be acutely aware of what everybody is going through. That not only are you going through it, but all the people that you come into contact with are somewhere in this period of transition, and they're probably not feeling that stable. Now, that doesn't mean you kind of let people do what they like. Oh, I mustn't ask anybody to do anything at work because they're probably feeling a bit confused. Obviously, people are paid to come to work and you're entitled to get them to do things, but be sensitive to it. If you're getting reactions from people that you didn't used to get pre-COVID, well, no surprise. People are not the same people that they were pre-COVID, and so you've really got to pay attention to that. There are, I promise, talk about authenticity. I keep saying I'm going to talk about it, and I really will. But I thought it'd be more helpful for people if I start with a couple of really simple qualities that it is important to bring to your leadership. I mean, they've always been there. They've always been useful parts of leadership. But I think now, the way that people are post-COVID, I think they're more important than ever. And really important to bring into your armory. The first one, the simplest word for it is clarity. If you can bring clarity to your leadership, this is going to be a huge help to everybody. What do I mean by clarity? Well, a summary of what's going on in the organization at the moment, something very clear that people have a context for what they're doing at work. A very clear and specific request to somebody that sets out exactly what it is you want from them and what your expectations are. That's clarity. A piece of feedback delivered to somebody when they've done a piece of work that lets them know how they performed and what they might want to do more of or less of in the future. All of that is clarity. Clarity is very much focused on the task aspects of work. And the reason, of course, that's always been important, but the reason it's particularly important now, and I would really encourage leaders to pay attention to it, is that everybody is so confused because nobody knows what is going on. Their country is in turmoil. Their relationships may be in turmoil because the way they manage them has changed in COVID. They're spending more time than ever before with a partner, or less time than ever before, depending which household they happen to be in. So their home life is disrupted as well. So they don't know what's going on at home. They don't really know what's going on at work. Are they home workers? Are they here? Do they have to wear masks? Don't they have to wear masks? Yeah. So the more clarity and simplicity you can bring to what you asked people to do, the better. That they will love you for it. People crave clarity. Yeah. It's the bit of us. It's what they say about teenagers. Teenagers seem completely out of control, but the truth is they really want to know what the boundaries are. They really need to know where they stand and what's expected of them. And it's the same with workers. So workers can be very much like children and teenagers sometimes. It's not fair. You gave him a bigger budget and you didn't give me any. You know where I'm coming from. Did I? Sorry, Celia. And you may have teenage children. I don't know.
I don't. Okay, thank God, I think.
I'm not straying into any forbidden territory there. I don't know if there was anything you wanted to say about clarity, Celia, while I'm pausing.
No, I just thought that was great. I was like, I should be taking notes here.
Okay. Well, so clarity, number one. And the second important quality is empathy. And by empathy, I mean a couple of things. I mean, remembering that the person or the people that you're talking to are human beings, being able to put yourself in their shoes and understand what's happening for them and what they're going through, and being able to bring some kind of warmth to a relationship and some kind of focus on them as people that makes them feel significant, makes them feel like they matter. And the simplest way, by the way, another top tip for you, well, let me go back in the chain. Everyone's always asking, how do I motivate my people? How do I keep people motivated? And of course, if you are somebody like me, of course, the answer is, it depends. Why don't you sign up for 6 coaching sessions? But if I put that aside, the quality that is a motivator for just about everybody is significance. People are motivated by a feeling of significance. I want to feel that I matter. People notice me. That I have some kind of purpose in the world.
Right.
So let me return to where I was. Top tip: the simplest way to make somebody feel significant is to make eye contact with them and maintain eye contact with them. Now, you might think, what? But you have a look at how often you actually look at people at work when you're talking to them, because chances are what you're actually doing is checking for an email while they're talking to you or doing something else. And you'll say, at some point, you'll say, oh yeah, it's okay, I'm listening, carry on. And of course, people expect it now. So I'm not going to say it doesn't work to do that. But what I would say is, if you actually stopped the typing of the email and turned around and looked at the person while they were talking to you, you have no idea how powerful that would be, because it's such a rare experience for us to actually have someone pay attention to us. It really, really makes a difference, and it has such a payback, and it costs nothing, and it's so simple to do. There are some real bad habits that we've picked up in the digital age, I think,
right.
where we are missing that direct contact with people, and it's very easy to do.
Especially with the virtual world now. I mean, you gotta like stare into the camera, but I can't see you if I stare into the camera, because I want to look at, you know, your facial expressions, right?
That's absolutely it. And I mean, the top tip I will often give people who are on Zoom or whatever, you know, video software they use, is look at the little green light when you're talking.
I don't have a green light. Where's my green light?
You don't have a green light?
Oh, that's because I have a little cover thing that's covering my green light.
Oh, right, covering a green light, yes. If you don't have a green light, find out where your camera is and look at that. But it's hard, takes a lot of practice, because Celia's right. I'm looking into the camera now, and I can sort of see Celia's shape, and I can see that she's moving a little bit, but I don't have a sense of her facial expression. So of course, you kind of have to, you know, do a little bit of sharing of the attention there. But the difference that it will make, my view, I mean, there are lots and lots of theories about why people find Zoom calls so tiring. My theory is it's because no one's making eye contact with you. You're shrinking as a human being, because everybody's attention seems to be somewhere else. And that's why I encourage people as much as they can to look into the camera when they're on these calls, because the other person will feel that you're looking right at them and making eye contact with them, and it'll make a real difference to them. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Celia. It is another kind of difficulty of our age.
It is. I mean, of course, I want to look and feel like I'm speaking to the audience, but I'm speaking to you, so therefore I've got to drop my eyes down and see you, so that I can focus on being present and really take in and absorb everything, all the advice you're giving. And it's counterintuitive on screen.
Yeah. It is counterintuitive. And again, you know, a bit like people, like I was saying with the, you know, doing your emails while somebody's talking to you, and people kind of accept it. We're all getting rather used to, well, this is how it works in calls. People don't look at us. And I think all I'm saying is, it's like a little bit of magic powder that you can sprinkle. If you just find a few opportunities to make that eye contact through the camera, you will feel, the people you're talking to will feel more connected to you than to other people that they deal with. And of course, that's just one bit of empathy. That was my big heading. It's where it starts, I think, is with finding a direct contact with the individual. But the skills of empathy, I mean, are the kind of opposite. I mean, the skills of clarity are very much about you being able to open your mouth and talk in a way that's kind of clear and makes sense and comes out exactly as you want it to. The skills of empathy are much more about listening, you know, asking questions, turning your attention over to the other person and really going with their agenda, even if, you know, just for a short time. Now, this is all kind of not that difficult, because there are clear skills that you can learn and you can practice. The difficulty comes that we find it hard to do both, to keep clarity and empathy in play at the same time. And they can get easily muddled with each other. So, for example, if I major on empathy and I allow it to muddle with my clarity, then instead of a clear, quite focused message from me that's about something that you need to do differently, you're more likely to get something from me of, oh, actually, that's really difficult for you, isn't it? I'll tell you what, why don't I do this bit and I'll give it back to you, and then you can. So in other words, I'm giving you lots of attention, and I'm treating you very well as a human being, but at the expense of a message you needed to hear in order to improve your performance. Or I might be very brilliant at clarity and then muddle that with the empathy, which is I kind of, when I ask for your opinion, I will then disagree with it, or I don't seem to be. I'll ask how you feel about that, but I don't seem to be particularly interested in the answer, because as far as I'm concerned, I've told you what I want, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to confuse the two, and the best advice actually comes from the world of negotiation, where the saying is, be tough on the issue, gentle on the person. So clarity is about being tough on the issue. Empathy is about being gentle on the person. And to come back to leadership in a post-COVID world, the clarity clearly is very welcome for people who are finding everything very confusing and are getting very lost at the moment. The empathy is very helpful for people who are feeling rather battered and bruised and lost as human beings. And the good news for you as a leader is that these two are really the only tools you need in order to get most of your day-to-day stuff done with a team. You're either being clear with somebody about something, or you're listening to them and just kind of, giving them some attention and helping them kind of make sense of something that's going on for them. So clarity and empathy, two that I would encourage everybody to major on. And now, finally, let me come back to authenticity, because authenticity is like the wrapper that goes round the clarity and the empathy. And we kind of know we think we know what authentic means. It's kind of about being yourself. That's usually as far as we get. It's about being yourself. Well, just consider, suppose that your boss comes into work tomorrow or next time you're working, depending on what's going on for you at the moment. Your boss comes in and says, do you know what? I've never liked your hair, and I've finally decided to tell you about it. Would you say to me, oh, my boss is so authentic, it's brilliant, and really motivates me with their authenticity? I don't think you would. And the boss would say, well, I'm being honest. Isn't it important to be honest? That's how authentic I am. Well, no, actually. There was a big piece of work done on authentic leadership by two gentlemen from the London Business School, Rob Goffey and Gareth Jones. They wrote a book with the wonderful title, Why Should Anyone Be Led by You? Which is a great question to ask yourself if you're a leader. But they dealt with authenticity, and their definition of how to be authentic was be yourself more with skill. But the point they made, I was fortunate enough to do a couple of events with Gareth Jones, and he said that the difficulty is that people don't always get to the third bit. They come back off the course and say, hey team, good news. I've got to be myself. And the team will go, no, we wanted you to be someone different. Or they master that and then get the next bit. Okay, good news team, I've got to be myself more. No, we want you to be less like the with skill bit means you are selective in dialing up certain aspects of yourself that are going to be helpful in a particular situation, and dialing down certain other aspects of yourself that are going to be less helpful in a particular situation. So with clarity and empathy, we're not saying, because again, this is the difficulty with the word authentic. Yeah. Well, if I was really being myself, I'm not really much good at empathy, so I'll just do the clarity bit. No. you can do it. You can do it because it's just about a skill that you can practice. But you'll do it in a way that makes sense for you,
right.
a way that has something of you behind it, something of your values, something of your personal style, something of your own experience that you bring to what you do. That's what we mean by authenticity. It's being selective in when and how to deploy those aspects of yourself that are pretty good. I mean, one example I give people is you go for a job interview. In the days when people actually went to job interviews and didn't wear masks, but you go for a job interview, chances are, if you're a man, you'll wear a suit and tie. I know there are some jobs, of course, that don't call for that, but traditionally you wear a suit and tie. Woman, you wear, a smart kind of formal business-looking outfit. Now, you probably, given a choice, you don't wear those kind of clothes. If it was up to you, you wouldn't be wearing them. So are you being inauthentic by wearing a suit for a job interview? No. You're showing, provided the suit fits and is comfortable and you don't look awkward in it, then what you are doing is showing an aspect of yourself that is particularly helpful in this situation, which is about having a positive impact with the person that you're meeting. It wouldn't be authentic to say to them, I don't normally wear a suit. You just kind of just go with it, and then another day wear something else that fits and is another aspect of yourself that you dial up and dial down. Celia mentioned in my introduction, I come from the world of the theatre originally, right. And I then ended up in the world of business psychology. Well, there were ways I used to behave as a member of a theatre company that wouldn't work in the world of business psychology. It's still me. It's still me, business psychology me, and it's theatre me. But I'm showing different sides of myself and keeping certain parts, out of the way. I don't know, does that make sense?
No, I love that whole description. And as you're talking about it, I'm picturing, I have very different facets of my life as well, just as a lot of people do. I am on a board of a College of Music at the university here. And so, there's a certain image when you go and listen to concerts and, how you have to dress and act. And yet I just came back from, I organized a van rally. Some of we have my husband and I have a Sprinter van that we travel around Colorado with our dogs and camp or glamp. Mm-hmm. And so I don't wear the outfits. I really go, camping gear or camping outfits. And then, I lived in Hawaii for 10 years and I used to surf. And so my whole persona was very different in that realm as well. But what's interesting is I actually got contacted by an old friend of mine that I hadn't seen in Hawaii for 25 years. And I was on a Zoom call with her yesterday. And so it brought me right back to when I was living in Hawaii on the beach and hanging out with my friends. But that was still me. That was still me, right? So yeah, there are different, you're authentic in each one of these groups and you're kind of a chameleon, but it's still you, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, because you're a veterinarian.
Veterinarian, yeah.
And you wouldn't talk to one of your coaching clients the way you'd talk to a dog in your surgery,
Sometimes I have to sit, stay.
Yes, down. But yeah, it is one aspect. I mean, another simple thing. So I do a lot of work in an aspect of authenticity, which most people call personal impact. Kind of how you show up, how you present yourself. Right. And very often, people might be seen by someone as inauthentic, as in, I don't really trust them. I'm not really sure what they're about. And actually, what's going on is just that they're kind of suffering a little bit from nerves, or they're feeling a little bit awkward in the situation they're in. All kinds of things will happen to you there. You have the fight or flight syndrome kicks in, your muscles will tense up, you have an overwhelming urge to move, you have all these kind of things going on. And this, of course, doesn't, if I now tense my muscles and have an overwhelming urge to move, it doesn't really show me at my best to the people who are watching me on screen. And that is not about you were suddenly not being yourself. It's about actually people were reading signals from you that were kind of in conflict. You know, you were talking like you knew what you were talking about, but your body language was suggesting that you didn't.
Right.
And we're trying to process that information. So sometimes authenticity can be as simple and as practical as, you know, I get lots of my clients to practice walking into a room, because the way you walk into a room will influence disproportionately the outcome of the meeting that you've come to attend. Because people will react to the signals that you send as you come in.
So you got to share those tips. How are we supposed to walk into a room?
Okay, well, because this is about authenticity, it is of course slightly different for each person. So we kind of calibrate it a little bit for you and kind of who you are and what's comfortable. But I would, first of all, I don't think you'd have any problem with the first one, Celia, which is smiling. People don't smile enough in business. Right. I would come in and smile at the room. The second point is about your posture as you come in. Sorry, I'm doing this. You don't walk into the room like this. No, sorry. I'm always one step ahead. This is what I'm about to say. In the research that's been done into people's perceived status, so you know, kind of how authoritative and credible people think you are. One of the things that makes the biggest difference is how upright your posture is, and how upright especially your head is. And, you know, some people who kind of tend to do a lot of that with their head, I'm now, of course, risking the fact that that's what I've been doing without realizing it all the way through. But
you're good.
It kind of lowers your status to do that. The more kind of firm you are, conveys more of a sense of expertise. So that's one example. The other thing about walking into a room is that there's a question about whose territory is this. So people, it's a little, I can't quite manage it on camera because you won't see all of me, but people who are uncomfortable in the territory will tend to kind of come in, like peer around the door and sort of, oh, okay, you know, asking permission to cross the threshold into the room. People who are comfortable in their own skin regard it as their territory and will come straight into the room. So there's a kind of, you know, sweet spot somewhere between coming straight into the room, being upright, smiling, and doing all of that. There'll be a few other subtleties as well, which we'd want to do. But it's usually because when I'm practicing that with people, it's because we're rehearsing a meeting where they've got someone they would describe as a difficult person that they've got to talk to. And actually, there's no such thing as a difficult person, but there are people whose behavior we find it difficult to deal with. So what you find, and you have to take my word for this, but when I work with people on rehearsing a meeting, all they need to do is a few tweaks around this idea of status and credibility, and usually non-verbal shifts, maybe a couple of verbal habits as well, but mainly non-verbal shifts. The meeting goes much, much better, and the other person suddenly isn't difficult at all. You know, people have a habit of becoming the way that we think of them. So if I think you're difficult, you'll start being difficult because I will be treating you in a kind of, I hope you don't mind, but is it? I mean, I know people think that the British are always like that in every meeting. Excuse me, sorry. But that's I even apologise all the time for being British. That's how British I am.
Well, you and my husband can have a chat because he's Australian, so.
Yeah.
Well, will you teach a course on that for OnPoint mentors?
Yeah, I can bring it. I actually have. There is a course of mine available on OnPoint Mentors on having the impact that you want. Okay. It doesn't cover walking into the room. I don't think. I probably mentioned walking into the room in passing because it's all done on video with me, just on video. Right. But I do cover a lot of stuff to do with getting comfortable physically. Okay. And so on. So okay. Yeah, I think that the impact side is quite well.
Maybe covered. We can have the acting part as a bonus module or something.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the listeners would find that fascinating. I mean, I know I find it fascinating. I always find, I mean, you studied acting. I had done a little bit of acting in my younger days. And it certainly helps when you are in a situation and you have to turn that character on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is about performance. And in fact, that's another important point about authenticity. An actor, a good actor, is never seen as inauthentic because they appear to be really inhabiting the role. They're who they claim to be. Bad actors are kind of what we think of as inauthentic because they don't seem to be, you're not sure you can quite believe what they're doing. Now, and this is a point I make in my course, that we've all had meetings with people where they walk in the room and you think, oh, they don't look quite as senior as I was expecting. You know, or another person might come in and think, oh, they look like they're the boss of this. Oh, they're not. Okay, they just come in to make the tea. Well, it's, you know, it's kind of about how we convey, how well we inhabit that role that we play. I mean, think how often the word performance is used in the world of work. You know, you're having a performance review. How are you performing in your job? It is kind of about, you know, are you looking like the person we want you to look like? And that there is in authenticity, there's a kind of a negotiation between who we feel we really are and who our employer expects us to be. And you've got to find a positive outcome to that negotiation. You've got to come up with something that, you know, got something of both in it, because you can't just be yourself, but you can't only be what your employer expects you to be and lose sight of yourself. You know, it's not going to work.
Right.
I should make a final point, actually, just to link us back to the post-COVID world, because I know I was talking about post-COVID leadership. But the reason authenticity is particularly important is because, you know, we are getting used to judging or trusting. Do we trust leaders? We're getting a lot of leadership, you know, at a national level, whatever country you live in, and you are making judgments about whether you trust your leaders or not to do a kind of good job on this. And so I think people are getting attuned to the idea of trusting a leader. And if you're able to lead in a way that is authentic to you, then I think people will trust you, because they get at that sense that you are comfortable in your own skin, and that they therefore know that whatever you're going to do is going to be okay, and coming from a kind of consistent place.
Do you think a leader should show kind of a more vulnerable side as well, or any signs of weakness? Is that authentic?
That's a brilliant question, actually, because and this is a point that well, I said I was lucky to do an event with Gareth Jones, who wrote one of the authentic leadership books. It's a point that he makes. He would say, so I'll quote him, that showing vulnerability is very useful for a leader in order to appear authentic, you know, because you're more authentic if you have a weakness or a vulnerability. But there is a difference between being vulnerable and being naive. That, you know, you don't want to come in every day with your team and say, let me tell you about another terrible thing I did.
That's too authentic.
Let me tell you about this spot that's developed on the, no, you know, it's yeah, but I think being vulnerable, I think if you're as a leader, if you're dealing with one of your team who's been struggling with something, and you're able to say, do you know what, I struggled with this when I was starting. I found this a real challenge, but, you know, here's what I found, and here's a way I found to get over that. That to me is a balance, really, an authentic way of being vulnerable.
Right. Well, I loved reading. You have, if anyone hasn't read your blogs on your profile, or even watched your beautiful intro video, which I love the guitar in the back, and you'll have to talk about your guitars in a sec. But your blogs were brilliant. I mean, I was cracking up the entire time reading these blogs. You have such a wonderful way of writing. And there was one, I wrote it down because it was so cute. Something about when you have an idea and, you lay it down on the floor or something to that effect to be trampled on.
Oh, yes.
Why don't you talk about that a little bit, about, ideas and criticism and
Yeah, sure. Yes, I mean, ideas, people generally, I'm going to make a sweeping generalization. People generally at work do not tend to share the ideas they have about how things might be improved at work. And the reason they don't share them is because of the fear, coming back to fear, the fear that they will be trampled on. Because generally speaking, if you sit in on an ideas meeting, it'll be, why don't we do this? No, we tried that last year. Okay, why don't we do that? Oh, it'd be too expensive. Why don't we do that? And, there's always a kind of a yes, but that comes. So you have to be bold to have ideas. It shouldn't stop you sharing them, but what you can do, this is another suggestion. I'm not going to pretend this is always easy to do, because you kind of might feel a little awkward about saying this. But if you have an idea and you suggest it to someone and they shoot it down, you can say, oh, okay, well, I'm sorry it didn't work for you, but can you tell me, is there any way in which we might make it work? What would have to happen in order to make this idea work? It's a little bit, I borrow this from the world of sales. If you're selling something and somebody has a concern about it or isn't sure about it, a good salesperson will tend to say, okay, well, what would we need to do in order for you to be happy with it? What would have to happen for you to kind of sign the contract and so on? So you could try a bit of that. Try educating people to be a little more appreciative about people's ideas. If I were facilitating an ideas meeting, what I tend to get people to do is to force themselves to build on the idea. So somebody says, well, why don't we, I don't know, hey, why don't we all work from home? No, maybe not. Whatever the idea is, then the next person to speak will say, well, if we did that, what we might do is, and they add something that's building on the idea. And then somebody else says, well, okay, well, if we did it like that, then what we'd have to do is make sure, and what you're doing is you're always building on the idea. And the point is, you don't have to ever decide whether it's a good or a bad idea, because you can't really keep building on an idea that isn't viable. And if you keep building on it, all of a sudden people think, hey, actually, this will work. Where if they shot it down right at the beginning, and then there's not much hope.
Right. Well, I was smiling as I was telling you I was reading your blogs, because I said, honey, you to my husband, I'm like, you got to read this. And in the middle of making dinner, he lies down on the floor, on the kitchen floor. And I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, I'm waiting for you to trample me like a bunch of grapes. Like, I've got an idea, and you're going to hate it.
Oh, okay. And did you? What did you do? What happened when he told you the idea?
It was brilliant. I mean, we have a great time. He's a little comedian at home, so we. But yeah, I'm encouraging, if you have not read any of Phil's blogs, go to his blogs. Now, I have to tell you, I have to ask you, tell me about your collection of guitars.
Oh, okay. So I own, what do I own? I have an acoustic guitar, an electric guitar, Fender Telecaster for those who like guitars, and then I have 3 bass guitars. So I've been a musician since I was about 15. I first joined a band when I was 15. Taught myself to play the guitar, and I can honestly say I have not progressed at all since I was 15. I actually have spent most of the last 25 years playing drums. I've been a drummer in a few bands, but I've moved to take up the bass. And I've been, the last kind of year, I've been teaching myself bass guitar, because although it's a guitar and I already played the guitar, it's a little more, you have to learn scales and arpeggios, and triads and stuff like that. So, but I do have, and I'm waiting. I think I've got to wait another 6 months, but I've got a bass guitar being hand built for me by a company in Canada, and it's the most beautiful bass I've ever seen. And I decided to save up some money and ask them to build one for me. So yeah, I am a musician and I do play the guitars that I own, but I love them as works of art as well. They're things of great beauty, and I get very excited by. I don't know if you Celia, or anyone tuning in is a fan of Marie Kondo. You know, the tidying guru, the Japanese. When she talks about, you pick something up and does it give you a spark of joy?
Yeah.
That's how my instruments are.
Yeah.
Are you musical, Celia?
Well,
oh, yes. Yes.
There's a guitar in there someplace, but I can't say I play very well. So promise me post-COVID, we'll form the OnPoint Mentors Band or something.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
When we have our annual conference, we'll just all get together and kind of jam a little bit.
Yes, marvelous. Yeah.
Well, Phil, I think we are up at our hour. I so enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
Let's certainly do it again, because there's tons of topics that I know you can teach. And I'm going to get you to create that bonus module about walking into a room and putting on a performance. But until next time, Phil, thank you so much for spending the time with us.
No, thank you, Celia, and I really loved your questions. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. All right, we'll see you next time.